Hello and welcome to this tutorial to help you learn more about building Workbooks reports. In this session, we're starting to look at some commonly used formulae and situations where using them will help you to build better reports. Formulae can be used for many purposes, including carrying out calculations such as additions, subtractions, multiplications, and so on. For example, if you've got a straightforward commission structure, you might multiply the value of the deal by a decimal number to return the amount of commission on each deal, and then add the values up in a summary report to show how much each salesperson has earned. The symbols used for these calculations are just like the ones used on your computer keyboard or in Excel, so hopefully you'll find them familiar. You can use a formula to compare data from a field with data of your choice and return one value if they match and another if they don't. For example, you might want to attribute sales reps to a particular sales territory. So you might say something like, if the sales rep is Bill, then the sales territory is Northern. You can use formulae to reformat data, such as formatting dates to display differently, maybe round decimal values up or down, or change the case of a string of text to upper or lower case, and so on. You can do lots of things with dates, such as calculating the difference in days between two dates, or adding a time period to a date. For example, you might want a report to show you all your contracts that are due to expire in more than 90 days but less than 180 days, so that you can run a renewal outreach program. You can use the concatenation function to join data together, such as displaying a number followed by a percentage symbol. And you can convert data from one type to another, for example converting a number into a string of data. To give you a little bit of background, formulae in Workbooks reports are written using a cut-down selection of MySQL statements. For some of you this might mean something, but for the majority of you it probably doesn't. Rest assured though, there are many similarities with formulae in Excel, and there are lots of resources on the internet to help you if you need them. I'll provide links to a couple of useful sites later. You may hear the formulae being described as clauses, as queries, maybe statements, or functions, and for our purposes this terminology isn't particularly important and it's interchangeable. What is important though, just like in Excel, is that you use the correct syntax when writing your formulae. The majority of our customers never need to build formulae and can use the inbuilt totals and counts and averages and so on that have been covered in other tutorials. But there are three areas that do come up quite frequently. In this tutorial, we'll focus on using the concat function. Concat is short for concatenation and simply means to link things together in a chain or a series. So this function allows you to link two or more pieces of data into a string. We do have separate tutorials covering the case function and also the if function. The syntax for using the concat function is relatively simple. First you use the word concat and open a bracket. Then you enter the first value that you want to see in your string. This can be a piece of text, in which case you'd need to put apostrophes around it, or it can be the name of a field. Then you add a comma to show that you've finished with your first value. Now you can enter what you want to use as a separator between your first and subsequent value. This really is a string in itself, so you need to wrap it in apostrophes. In this example, I've used a dash with a space before it and also one after it. And then when you've finished with your separator, you add another comma to show that you've finished that and you're ready to move on to the next value. Again, you need to use the comma at the end of that to say that you're ready to move on to the next thing, which for me is my second separator. This time, just to show the difference, I've used a space rather than a dash, but either way you do still have to remember to use the apostrophes either side and use a comma. Then put in your third value and the closing bracket. This example is joining three things together, but you might want just two, or you might want to join many things together, which is absolutely fine. Using that syntax, if I were to join together the first name, the middle name and the last name of someone called John Peter Jones, the output would look like this. It is a little bit odd to put a hyphen between the first and the middle names, but I just wanted to do that to show you the difference in output. There is, however, something that you need to watch out for with the concat function. Imagine you've written a formula to join together the first, the middle and the last name of people on your database, which would look like the formula at the top of the table on the screen now. Then if we've got someone whose name is John Peter Jones, using the formula, the output would say John Peter Jones. The second row is for someone called Sarah Green, who doesn't have a middle name, and the output is Sarah Green. The third row is for someone called James Smith, and James doesn't have a middle name either. The problem is that using concat, with James we're not getting any output. The difference is because for the second row, Sarah's middle name is empty. That means that the database does know what the value is blank or empty. An empty string is a string with 0 length or no character. However, for James, the middle name field is null, which means there's an absence of a value. We don't know what the value is. It might exist, it might not, we just don't know. This can be quite a tricky concept to understand, especially because when you look at your records on the screen, you can't tell by looking at them whether the field is null or empty. But whenever you use concat to join together strings, if one or any of the values in there is null, you will get null returned back to you. There is a way around this, which is by using a variation of the concat function called concat_ws or concatenate with separator. This treats null values as empty strings. You start your formula with the word concat followed by _ws and open a bracket. The first thing after the bracket is the instruction about what you want the separator to be. This means it will be the same between every string that you're joining together, and on the screen at the moment it's just a space with apostrophes around it because the space itself is a string. Then a comma to say that you're done with your separator. After that, you enter in the values that you want to join together, each one separated by a comma, and finish with a closing bracket. So that's your formula. If you apply that to the same data that we saw earlier, you'd get James Smith as the output for the third row rather than null. Let's go into Workbooks to see that in action. I've got a details view open here in edit mode, showing the three people that we saw on the slide earlier, John, Sarah and James. It's just a simple list report based on people. You can see that we haven't got a middle name for either Sarah or James. And if I open each of these records, there's Sarah, nothing is appearing in the middle name. And likewise I'll open James. And again, nothing appearing in the middle name field. But there's no apparent difference to the naked eye between those. I'm going to add in a concat column to join together these people's first, middle and last names. So add a calculated column. Now I can just start typing concat. Hopefully if you've watched some other tutorials you've seen that you can do that when you know the function that you're looking for, but if you don't, then pick it from the function picker below. It's a string function because it's joining strings of data together, and it's up at the top here, concatenation, concat. But as I say, feel free to type that in if you're comfortable with it. So I want to join together the first name, then I add in my comma, then my separator. So I'm going to start with an apostrophe, hit the space bar, another apostrophe and a comma. Then I want the middle name and a comma, and again an apostrophe space, apostrophe and a comma for my second separator, and then the last name, and close off with a closing bracket. You can see that for Peter, who did have a middle name, we've got John Peter Jones. For Sarah, who didn't have a middle name, we've got Sarah Green. But we're not seeing anything at all for James Smith. And that's because although we can't see it through the user interface, the middle name field for Sarah is empty, whereas the middle name field for James is null. Therefore, it's returning null to us in that concatenated string. I'm going to do the same sort of thing again, but this time I'm going to use the other approach that we've talked about. I'm going to use the concat with separator. So add another calculated column. And again, you can type it in or pick it from the function picker. You'll probably want to pick it for the first 2 or 3 times that you use it, but once you're familiar with it, you won't need to. Now the first thing we need to specify here is what we want the separator to be. So I'm going to use apostrophe space, apostrophe, comma. And then in a very similar way to the way I built the concat formula, I'm just going to put in the strings that I'm wanting to join together, each one separated by a comma. It doesn't mean the comma will show in the output, it's just a way of saying, yep, that's what I want, now you can move on to the next string. Finish off with a closing bracket. And now you can see that the output for all 3 rows, we've got values, including that 3rd row for James Smith. The concat with separator has changed that null value and treated it as an empty string, so we do get an output. I would say that if you have any doubts over the completeness of the data in your database, I'd recommend that you use this approach, concat with separator, so that you don't get null values back in your report. There's another type of concat function called group concat, and this can be used on summary views to join together values from different rows of data into one long string. For example, if you wanted to see all the campaigns that a person has been a member of, you could build a person report and in the details view add in a column to show the campaigns that they belong to. This would result in multiple rows per person. You can see here that for Aaron Mills, for example, there are multiple rows reflecting all the different campaigns that he is a member of, and further down the same again with Abigail Wilson. But you could then build a summary view and group that data by the person reference number to get 1 row per person. And if you've used the group concat functionality, you can see all the campaigns that Aaron is a member of, all joined together separated by a comma, and likewise for Abigail. The formula used for this is simply group underscore concat, open brackets, the value that you want to join together, close your bracket. This approach can be really handy when you want to find people, for instance, who are members of one campaign but not another. With the report on the screen at the moment, you could apply a criteria to look for where the string contains value A but doesn't contain value B. Another example, imagine your support manager wants to approach any customers who've bought voice over internet products from you but who haven't bought support, because this would be a natural cross-sell. To help you, it says here that all VoIP product codes start with VoIP and all support services start with support. So let's go into Workbooks to build that report. There are different places you could start building this report. You might want to start with invoices or contracts, or as I've done, with orders. So this is just a simple details view of orders, but it only contains information from the header of the order and doesn't contain any details about the line items or the products that have been bought. To do that, I need to add a column and drill through to line items and select product. Hopefully you've watched the tutorial on joining records and this makes sense. In real life, you'd want to include criteria to exclude draft orders and probably include some date ranges too. But for the purposes of demonstrating the theory of group concat, I'm not going to do that. So now that I've refreshed my preview, I'm seeing multiple rows for the same order, and that reflects the fact that I've joined onto the line items. The product column itself is over here on the far right, and you can see there's a product here for VoIP phone and a support product as well as other ones, install and so on. I now want to add a summary view so that I can use my group concat approach. And it's a calculated column. As you've seen before, you can just start typing the formula if you want, but if you're not sure how to write it, then go to the function picker. And there's group underscore concat with an open bracket. The thing that we want to concatenate together is that field that we just added to the details view, the one that tells us what the product is. So I'm going to go to my column picker to do that. Notice that it's automatically put parent in front of product there because it's pulling that value from the parent view of this report. And that's all I need to do, just close off the bracket. If I don't do anything else and just save and close this formula, what I'll get is a big single string, a long single row of all the products that have been sold across all of the orders in my details view. So what I actually want to do is break this down onto a customer by customer basis. And if you scroll down in this dialog window, you will see that you get a grouped by option. So I'm going to group by the customer reference. So I've now got a big long concatenated string of data, but it's separated out onto different rows for each of my customers. To make the customer a bit easier to understand, I can always add a value column and go and get the customer name from the parent view. So now that I've got a report showing me which products each customer has ordered, I can add in a couple of calculated criteria. And I can say that my all products contains VoIP, and a second one to say that my all products does not contain support. And there we go, that's reduced my report down to just 3 customers who have bought VoIP products from us, but at no point have they bought any support. You might think that this was a complicated way to get these results, and that maybe I could just have applied the same kind of criteria at the details level. But remember, if I'd done that, that would return me line items where we've sold VoIP systems, but it would exclude all the line items that were for support, and the customer would have bought support on a different line item and perhaps even on a different order. So that wouldn't have got me the end results that I'm looking for. Let's have a quick recap on the concatenation function. It enables you to join 2 or more values together, and this means you can include a separator as one of the strings you're joining, and therefore the separators between each string can be different if you want them to be. Remember though that if any of the values in the string are null, then the whole string will be returned as null. To avoid this issue, you can use concat with separator, which again enables you to join 2 or more strings of data together, but you specify a separator at the beginning. That means the same separator is used between every string. This approach treats any null values as empty strings, so you'll still get an output. The third variation we looked at is group concat, which is an aggregate function joining data from multiple rows into one long string. This means you can't use group concat on a details view, but you can on a summary view. I mentioned earlier that Workbooks reporting formulae uses a cut-down version of MySQL, and there's lots of sites on the web that might be helpful with the syntax. 2 that we find particularly useful are dev.mysql.com and another one called w3schools.com. So do go and visit those and see if they're useful. Thank you as always for watching. If you need more help on reporting in particular, then you can go to our knowledge base and you'll find it at workbooks.com/help/reporting.